Hey y'all, so I am very excited about this. If you are an OG to my channel back when I started it like 5 years ago, which is still like wild, or 6 years ago, I don't even know at this point, but um, if you are an OG, you know that I used to do Monday devotions with D. This was a devotional that I would post on Monday mornings, and it would be just some encouragement for the start of the week. Well, even though the week starts on Sunday, but like the start of the work week, I guess, or work week for like traditional work week. I was watching my old Monday devotions and I was so encouraged. And it just shows how faithful God is and how intentional God is, that a video that I recorded like 4 or 5 years ago, he knew would be necessary, even for me at this point in time. And I was like, I need to continue doing this, and not just to like share a video, but to get back into, really like studying the word and, you know, sharing that encouragement and understanding that uh, how important it is. And I remember even looking at some of the comments and someone saying like, I really needed this morning on this Monday, and I was like, I needed it too. So I'm happy to say that I'm back doing Monday devotions with D, which is like so crazy. But yeah, so here we are. Unfortunately, it took having to deal with certain things to do that, but it doesn't matter how you got here, just that you're here, right? So today I wanted to share a devotion about trusting God, not trusting man. Trusting that even when people are telling you to do certain things, or even when people try to convince you of certain things, to stand true to what you stand for, stand true to God's word and what he shared with you. And I was reading this story, and I was super encouraged, and I said this will be a great start to Monday devotions. I can't promise you that they will be like every Monday. I'm gonna really try my hardest, but here goes. So I'm sorry if I'm looking down. I'm looking at my Bible and at my phone, because I did write down notes and stuff. So yeah, any verse that I share, I'm going to have it on the screen. I usually try to be really good with that, so you can also see it. But I'm going to be reading in here. So I wanted to get into the book of Daniel. Especially in the beginning. I know a lot of times people talk about like the Daniel fast, and I'm just gonna do the Daniel fast. And so a lot of people know about this story because of that, but I took something a little different from it when I was reading it again, and I just want to share, what I took from it. I'm sticking with the first chapter. Yeah, I'm doing. I just want to go through Daniel chapter 1. That's what I really wanted to focus on. The whole book of Daniel is really good, and I definitely encourage you to read it. And maybe another devotion will be about the other portions of it. But yeah, so I just want to just go through and just read Daniel chapter 1. And you can read along with me on the screen. So Daniel chapter 1. During the third year of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim and Judah, and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and placed them in the treasure house of his God. Nebuchadnezzar educates young Hebrew men. So this is the title of verse 3 and forward. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men. he said. Make sure they are all well versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They were to be trained for 3 years, and then they would enter the royal service. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. See, I keep saying it. I'm sorry if I'm messing up these names. But they were 4 young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names, which these names are probably a little bit more familiar from stories that you've heard. But Daniel was called Belteshazzar. Hananiah was called Shadrach. Mishael was called Meshach, and Azariah was called Abednego. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, very popular story in the book of Daniel. But Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. He asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods. Now God had given the chief of staff both respect and affection for Daniel. But he responded, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has ordered that you eat this food and wine. If you become pale and thin compared to the other youths your age, I'm afraid the king will have me beheaded. Daniel spoke with the attendant who had been appointed by the chief of staff to look after Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Please test us for 10 days on a diet of vegetables and water, Daniel said. At the end of the 10 days, see how we look compared to the other young men who are eating the king's food. Then make your decision in light of what you see. The attendant agreed to Daniel's suggestion and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and better nourished than the young men who had been eating the food assigned by the king. So after that, the attendant fed them only vegetables instead of the food and wine provided for the others. God gave these 4 young men an unusual aptitude for understanding every aspect of literature and wisdom. And God gave Daniel the special ability to interpret the meanings of visions and dreams, which becomes very useful later on in this book. But anyways, when the training period ordered by the king was completed, the chief of staff brought all the young men to King Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and no one impressed him as much as Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the royal service. Whenever the king consulted them in any matter requiring wisdom and balanced judgment, he found them 10 times more capable than any of the magicians and enchanters in his entire kingdom. Daniel remained in the royal service until the first year of the reign of King Cyrus. I love the word of God. But I love this story because we see here that Daniel said, I am not going to defile my body by eating what the king is telling me that I need to eat. Now, Daniel was bold because the king is telling y'all need to do this, and you're like, nah, bro, I'm not. Excuse me? What? How is that even possible? You cannot say no to the king. You cannot just be like, I'm not feeling it next. So if I were in that position, I'd be like, give me the food and give me the wine because I am not trying to die. Daniel knew that that was not what he needed to do. He knew that this was not what he needed to enter into his body. And so I was kind of thinking about this. A lot of times, people's opinions, people's thoughts, how society does things, how people do things, what's right and what's wrong, and what you have to follow. You have to follow this step, you have to do this, you have to do this, and then you have to do this. It can get overwhelming, right? And at this time, Daniel knew that he did not need to give in to what society was saying. He did not need to give in what the king was saying. He did not need to give in to what anyone else was saying, or what rules he had to follow in order to be entered into the royal service for King Nebuchadnezzar. He knew that all I need to do is not defile my body. So when I thought about this, I said, what kind of trust does Daniel have in God to just be able to stand up to the king, or stand up to the attendant, honestly, and say, no, I'm not going to eat this food because I trust God. He didn't say that, but that's what his actions were showing. I'm not going to defile my body because I trust God. That is some next level type of trust right there. And when I was just thinking about, my life and difficult situations, the Bible's not about me and what I want, but it does provide some encouragement, and it does provide help as far as how to live the life that God desires for us to live. He gives us, real life examples for situations that we're dealing with. Sometimes we feel like God is silent, but he's talking in his word. So I just wanted to share that little tidbit. But when looking, in my life in difficult situations, I remember just recently having a conversation with my sister, and I was just like, I trust God, but when you look at the reality of things, this, that, and the third, it doesn't make sense. I'm at this place in my life. How is it possible that, if God is sharing these certain desires for certain things to happen, if it hasn't happened yet, then how? The timeline doesn't make sense. And in this situation with Daniel, the attendant was probably like, Daniel, this doesn't make sense. Like, if you look at the reality of it, if you are not eating the certain foods, if you're not doing these certain things, you're not going to be good enough. You're not going to be equipped enough to be able to be entered into the royal service. But Daniel said, nah, I trust God. He said, I'm not going to defile my body. I'm not going to succumb to what society is saying. I'm not going to succumb to my flesh. I'm not going to succumb to whatever it is just because of what you think is best. But I'm going to trust what God knows is best. I love this story because Daniel really had faith in God, and it kind of just made me think about, what does your faith in God look like? A lot of times, sometimes God has us waiting in certain areas, and it's like, God, if you look at the reality of things, and God is like, I don't care about your reality of things. I just care about you obeying me, you trusting me, and trusting that I'm leading and guiding you to where you need to go. So it's just crazy that, Daniel stood up for what he believed, for what he knew, and trusted God. And in doing so, he was eating differently than the other men who were training, but yet him, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were more equipped than the other men. Do you see how God works? It's crazy at how sometimes we think that if we succumb to the pressure of society, if we succumb to the pressure of even our own thoughts or what people say is better for us, but we know that God is calling us to certain things. We know that, okay, God wants us to do this, but I feel like this, or I think I want this. But God is just like, if you would just trust me, you are going to realize that you're going to be even more equipped than everyone else who's telling you to succumb to these other things and other feelings and all this other stuff. So that just shows you that when we trust God, the end result is better than what anyone else could expect, than what you could expect. And we cannot give in to man. And as much as, Nebuchadnezzar saw this and, was so, grateful and like, wow, like these men are even more equipped. They're 10 times better than the magicians and the enchanters and the story people and all those types of people, that they were better. So the biggest thing I want to share in this Monday devotion is to trust God with everything, even when it doesn't make sense. And I'm talking to myself too, because it can be so hard, y'all. Trust me, I know it can be so hard to surrender your flesh, to carry your cross, to just trust that even in the craziness, that even when things don't make sense, that even when society is telling you this, it's like your timeline is showing you this, where you are is not close to where, God is saying that you will be, and the desire that he puts in your heart. you have to trust that when you just put your trust in him and you don't surrender, or you don't succumb to your flesh, or you don't give in to society's standards, that you're going to be more equipped, that you're going to be so much better for it. And it's like reading this story was just so encouraging for me to just trust that, like, even when you don't feel like trusting God, that even when it's scary, even when it doesn't make sense, that we have to trust that it's gonna be okay. And it may sound so cliche, like, it's gonna be okay, just trust God. It's like, that is easier said than done. When you're in the thick of it, you know, you're like, how? The attendant is looking at Daniel like, how are you just gonna eat vegetables and be strong enough? It's not gonna work. But Daniel trusted God. He had faith, and he knew that he was not going to succumb to his flesh, give in to his flesh. And that was super encouraging for me. And I hope it's super encouraging for you to not give in, to not settle, to not give up, and to not just give in just because of what looks like it makes sense, but trust that, you know, when God does certain things in our life, it doesn't make sense. And all you can do is laugh, because you're like, God, how? So the biggest thing I can share in this devotion is to deny your flesh. Don't succumb to society standards. Don't succumb to your own thoughts and flesh desires, but to trust God in the process. You know, it sometimes it just doesn't make sense, and you're like, but God, this is what I want, and this is how I think I'm supposed to have it. But getting rid of that and just trusting that, God, I am going to trust you, and I am going to trust you even when it doesn't make sense, and I'm going to trust you even when people think I'm crazy, and I'm going to trust you even when I think I'm crazy. But ultimately, I'm going to trust you and have that faith. So let's have that faith and that strength like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did, especially this week, especially today, and always, and that we live that in our life, and that we don't forget that God is going to equip us with all that we need if we continue to deny our flesh, if we continue to trust in him, and trust that he will equip us with what we need for what he has called us to do. So yeah, I am super excited about this. I'm super excited about Monday devotions again. I cannot explain to you how last week I was just so encouraged by my old content, and it may sound so, like, I don't know, narcissistic or weird, or I don't know, but God was really speaking in those videos, and he was speaking to me last week when I just didn't know what to turn to. Obviously I knew to turn to God, but I remember I just couldn't sleep much last week, and I was like up at like 3 a.m. and I was like just watching some of these old videos, and I was like, wow, God, you were really working even back then for even this very moment at 3 a.m. in the morning. Like, what? So it just shows how faithful God is, and that in and of itself brings so much peace and contentment in my life, and I hope it does the same for you. So y'all already know the deal. You can comment below, or you can email me at behismasterpiece@gmail.com. Let me know how y'all feel about Monday devotions coming back again. Like, the OGs know. But if you're new to my channel, this is something that I used to do. I will make a playlist and I'll link it up here or below. So you can check out my old Monday devotions and see what I'm talking about, because you're probably like, what in the world? So yeah, so that's pretty much it. Go out, be kind, be caring, be loving, and as always, be his masterpiece. Bye, everyone.